So the chapter opens up with Class 1A taking care of the dictator villain. I guess that just gives these characters something to do. But then we're seeing a car pull up, the very same car that we saw at the end of the previous chapter. And it turns out that it's Endeavor. And that's interesting because some of us thought that that was All Might, because their cars look very similar, which means that we still don't know what happened to All Might after Izuku left him and it was revealed that Stain was behind the wall near him. But once Endeavor meets up with the students, he tells Kirishima that he wants to search the area with Hawks and the others. Kirishima's like, there's so many things I wanted to say to him, referring to Izuku. Now, what are those things? Well, I'm assuming it probably has something to do with friendship, why he respects him, and how they relate to each other. But also remember this, because I'm pretty sure this is going to happen at some point. Kirishima is for sure going to get his moment. But then we're coming to Shoto continuing to try to capture Izuku with his ice. And then he's like, hey, Midoriya, this could all be a part of All for One's plan. While we're all here, this could be his opportunity to attack UA. And it's completely understandable that Shoto would think this, because that's kind of been like a recurring theme since the war ended. All for One is now this hyper diabolical genius. Not saying that he wasn't always, but it wasn't always hammered home the way that it is now. And that he's predicted everything that's going to happen up until this point. He knew that Izuku was going to descend into this manic state. So like I said, understandable that Shoto would think that maybe his ultimate plan here is to attack UA. And I mean, it could be, but we, the audience, know that what All for One ultimately wants is one for all from Izuku. So it seems like that's priority number one, and maybe attacking UA, comes afterwards. And that brings us to the next part of this sequence, because that's what Izuku was thinking, because he's remembering both All Might and All for One saying like, you're next. Not UA is next, you, Izuku. And he's like, this fight is between One for All and All for One. You guys can't keep up. I'm the main character, you're just extras here. You're just collateral at this point. And that angers Shoto, and he's like, oh yeah? Alright, well, see me in a couple pages. So then Tsuyu and Mineta step up and try to capture Izuku as well, but they both fail, and this leads to Izuku activating a faux 100% slingshot. And right before he launches himself, we see Uraraka coming in trying to stop him, but he barely just gets past her and launches himself. At this point, it seems like he's successfully escaped, because faux 100% slingshot, that's crazy. And we're definitely going to see how crazy it is, because after Uraraka misses him, it reveals beneath her that Class 1A has set up this elaborate ice ramp, minecart, roller coaster thing. You can't even make out everyone that's involved here, but you can see that Tokoyami, Shoji, Koda, Sato are giving it an initial push, and it turns out what they're pushing is Shoto and Bakugo, who themselves are pushing this giant acid blob that was created by Ashido. So they get pushed into the ramp, and then Shoto does the flash freeze heat wave as a propulsion to shoot them off of it. Then in midair, they're converging with Uraraka, who's falling from trying to get Izuku, and she slaps the acid, making it 0G. Then Bakugo, who is still on it, does his explosive speed turbo cluster as more propulsion on top of what Todoroki has already established. And while this is happening, he says, Deku, there's so many things I want to say to you. No, there's so many things I have to say to you. So just like Kirishima and Uraraka, I'm pretty sure, maybe in the previous chapter, establishing that Bakugo, more than anyone, is going to have his moment with Izuku, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But then he says, but the one who has the body to withstand such speed other than you, Izuku, is, and then it turns out that inside of the acid was Ida the whole time. And then Ida launches himself on top of all of the momentum that was already established, and then doing this allows him to finally grab Izuku's hand. So like I said, that is insane how fast Izuku is off of slingshotting himself with faux 100%, that it took all of this from Class 1A just to grab him. And as this happened, we see the second user of One for All speaking. And I guess this is the continuation to what he said a couple chapters back. And he says, if there is anyone who could complete the current Deku, it would be the people who are willing to run alongside him. So back when he was initially setting this dialogue up, we saw Bakugo in the following panel, and I thought, oh, he was directly referring to Bakugo possibly, which was interesting, you know, because of all of his infamous possible ties to the second user. But now that he's saying this, turns out that he's not talking about Bakugo, but he's just talking about his friends in general, I guess. Because here, it's clearly Ida, but the ones who are willing to run alongside him, it's, you know, pretty much all of his close friends. Totally understandable. I mean, the Vestiges, I assume, are aware somewhat of his close relationships at the minimum. So yeah, no direct connection to Bakugo, at least yet. Not saying it's guaranteed that there is going to be, but I mean, come on, let's just keep stirring the pot as long as we can. And we're coming to the last page here, and they're both crying, and Ida, talking to Izuku, is like, sticking your nose in other people's business is what makes a true hero, right? A call back to their moment in the Stain arc. And this causes them both to cry, and that's where the chapter ends. So what I think is going to happen after this is like what I've been talking about throughout the chapter. Everybody has their moments that they need with Izuku. Kirishima, Uraraka, and Bakugo. And I think at least Uraraka and Kirishima are going to get it in the next chapter, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bakugo and Izuku get their own chapter dedicated to their moment. This is like maybe how the arc ends, with Bakugo just putting all of his cards on the table and just saying everything that he's ever wanted to say to Izuku, and then maybe even vice versa. And maybe that causes Izuku to come to a better mental state, and then he decides to come back after that, maybe. I think that would be a pretty interesting and satisfying way to end this arc, and one that I'm sure most of the community would be on board with. So it seems like we have, 1, 2, maybe 3 chapters at the most of this Class 1A trying to capture Izuku extended sequence here. So for those of you who are still watching, maybe I can interest you in a Crunchyroll crate. This is, of course, a monthly subscription box from Loot Anime, but it is Crunchyroll themed and licensed. And they definitely send you some interesting stuff, such as a full-blown scarf from Burn the Witch. It's actually kind of nice material. I did read this series and it's fine, but I guess it's something nice in the interim. You also get legitimately cool shirts like this one, which is fully Coolie themed. Like, this is a legitimately aesthetic shirt. They also give you little knickknacks like these, like buttons. And whatever this is, no idea. Whoops. What this is, but hold on, it comes with a guide. ReZero Starting Life in Another World cord wrap. It wraps your computer cords, and then you get a insignia that goes on top of it if you like ReZero. Cool. So yeah guys, Crunchyroll crate. Link in the description. You get cool stuff like this every month, and you'll be helping me out too. Thanks, guys. But let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Izuku's eventually going to come back to Class 1A? Do you think Izuku is eventually going to come back to UA? Do you think Stain's going to show up? Do you think he's going to escape? Will All For One attack UA? Let me know. And if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.